Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. This will be part 2 of his focus on the importance of the number 55, how in geometry, arithmetic, music and astronomy, but especially via metrology, as in Thoth and Chesed, Egyptian guides of weights and measures, Hermes, Mercury, guides of weights and measures, and how this applies to architecture. So the Great Pyramid, but also Masonic connections, the Doric, Ionic and Corinthian columns, which also the Doric and Ionic represent systems of measurement, also systems of music. But okay, so where I left off, part 1 looking, for instance, Washington Monument. I'd covered some places here in Sydney, but the Washington Monument, 55 feet wide at the base, depending on what source, it's a little bit over that. The Pyramidal cap, 55 feet tall. The base at the top, 34.55 inches at the top, so 55, just rounding it off. At the bottom, 34 at the top, and then the Pyramidal of 55 feet, now 34 and 55 are Fibonacci numbers, so embedded now in this Washington Monument. There is also plaques there, which have over 100 of them, from the mechanics, from Oddfellows, and from Freemasons as well. Very, very strong connections. Of course, the whole city is there, but that 55 feet will be coming to this. But as we saw part 1, for instance, the former glass pyramid in the Botanic Gardens here in Sydney, with this geometry of 55 nodes, with these connection points, are also very, very close to 55 feet. And also the Lands Department building by James Barnett, very important architect. So many symbolic references, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian in the architecture, but the dome, 55 feet wide at the top. Pyramid of Peace and Reconciliation in Astana, also pointing us towards that 55, as in 5 levels. The 5th level, or the 5th pyramidal number, is 55. But the Carillon at Canberra, ACT, again I should have fixed that, it's ACT, Australian Capital Territory, just like Washington DC, District of Columbia. This is essentially in the geometry of the city, the architecture. This would be equivalent of the Washington Monument here in Canberra. Here's some photos of it. So it's a bell tower. Carillon's a bell tower. That's where the bells are housed, but you also get a hint of what's going on underneath. And so just to zoom in, so that directly underneath, there's even a hexagon on the floor plan, but what we have here is this unusual reinforcement. It's like it get clearly part of the design, and that shape, or that creates 81 triangles. So you just count up the triangles, there are 81 there. Very important number. We'll get back to that because this relates to 55, because we have 81 triangles, brings us to these 55 nodes, 55 being the 10th triangular number, 55 being the 10th Fibonacci number. But the Carillon is a bell tower. To qualify as a Carillon, you must have at least 23 bells. Well, the Carillon has 55 bells. And Pythagorean tuning, bronze bells as well, that would link to some recent uploads, but to tune these bells, you'd be using, well, Pythagorean tuning. And so that's a link as well via 81, as we saw, but also with 108, because as you'll note, the way that these are divided and the inherent geometry of the building leads us to this, it's, see how each of these obelisks that fuse together, a three-sided obelisk, points to this Star of David pattern. Which brings us to the Tetractys. The mystery schools connected to Pythagoras, they swore an oath on the Tetractys, that's what it is there. And also that has connections to, or so many aspects, but also music theories. So 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4, the perfect 4th and 5th in music, but also 2 to 1 being used in tuning as well. But there we see how each of these triangles, which are led to, but also those which are created by the inherent structure itself, embed the Tetractys. Is a classic image of Pythagoras, a 3-4-5 triangle, music, geometry, astronomy, and above his head we have the tetractys. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4. This would also connect to the tetragrammaton, which is so important in both the tetractys and tetragrammaton are consistent symbols in the alchemists and Kabbalah, the name of God as well, which would link to Masonic tradition in regards to Hiram Abiff, for instance. But we can see how even the tetractys or the tetragrammaton fits within this geometry nicely, and even the 108 triangles here, or 81 Pythagorean tuning harmonic numbers. But of course the focus of these videos is on 55. Now what's interesting is that 55 nodes, well, if you include to create the full Star of David, now we have 73 nodes, while on the inside the hexagon created by that has 37 nodes. Very important because how they link to 55. So there's a carillon, 55 nodes, 55 bells. In hexadecimal or base 16, 55 is 37. So there are 37 nodes within the hexagon on the inside. 37 is the 12th prime number, while the larger Star of David hexagram pattern contains 73 nodes. 73 is the 21st prime. In this particular geometry, the only prime numbers that appear are 37 and 73. 37 is the 12th. 73 is the 21st. Just spin the digits around. So amongst prime numbers, 37 and 73 are actually quite special, and it's a very unique thing that these 55 nodes, which gives us 108, 71 and many other numbers. I'm not going into those for the moment, but all the Pythagorean tuning harmonic numbers are embedded in there in various forms, linked to 55, 55 to 37 and 73, the 12th and the 21st. And it's also interesting to note that 55 is halfway between these. So 37 plus 18 is 55. 55 plus 18 is 73. Unique prime numbers, these are the only two primes that appear, and of course these other connections. Now I could go on further in regards to 73 and 37, but not for this particular episode. I want to stay with 55. So 55 bells, the geometry beneath 55 is the 10th triangular number. We saw that in the pyramid at the Glasshouse Pyramid, now removed and replaced. 2015 it was dismantled. But of course 55 is the 10th triangular number. 55 is the 10th Fibonacci number. Even 5 plus 5 is 10, which is a nice little link. 55 is the 5th pyramidal number. So whether you're stacking cannonballs or stacking pyramids, to get to that 5th layer, just as in the Pyramid of Peace and Reconciliation in Astana. And again, 10th and, well, the 5th is halfway between there. It's also the 5th heptagonal number, 1, 7, 18, 34 and 55. 34 and 55 are also Fibonacci numbers, but it's in recreational number theory they also call it a Kaprekar number because 55 squared, 3025. 30 plus 25 is 55. So in number theory as well is very, very special, very unique number, and it's embedded multiple times in very important architecture in Washington, Canberra, Brasilia, Astana, but also in Brasilia, but that's something else for the moment. Now, LV, 55 in Roman numerals, well, that's a builder square and that's a compass. LV, that's a nod to my much older, less handsome brother. And 55 is also a centered nonagonal number. And it's interesting to note that these first 5 are also triangular numbers, 55 being the 4th centered nonagonal number, but 55 is the 5th pyramidal number, 91 is the 6th pyramidal number. So the Washington Monument, 55 feet. The Lands Department building here in Sydney by James Barnett, 55 feet. At the the copper dome at the top there, and also the pyramid in the Botanic Gardens. Now, what about the Great Pyramid? Well, 440 Egyptian royal cubits at the base. It's a little bit more complex than that because each side varies slightly, but the total perimeter is 1760 Egyptian royal cubits. Therefore, the average base is 440 cubits. Borderland mapping, such as the Peri-Reis map, they have this old different mapping system. Didn't have longitude and latitude. They had these rosettes. Well, it just turns out, so this borderland mapping system is this geometry where we have 32 points surrounding a 33rd central core. So 32 over 33, which would link again to, for instance, Scottish Rite, 32 rites open, 33rd by invitation, for instance. Very important number, of course, in the Esoteric as well. I'll link this playlist, but episode 7 and 8 focus on this 33 and 32 connection as well. What does it have to do with the pyramids? 32 around the 33rd. Well, the base length of each side of a pyramid is 440, so if you divide that by half, 220, divide it by half, 110, divide it by half, you get 55. Can't divide it any further without going into fractions. So, well, that just turns out that if you divide the perimeter of the Great Pyramid by 32, so 32 around the 33rd core, 55 cubits is your one of the integral measurements in there. Also 5.5 cubits in regards to the second as well, but these digits of 5 and 5. Well, it just so happens that 55 Egyptian royal cubits, well, what is a royal cubit? It is pi over 6 meters within like 40 microns. Well, so it is pi over 6 meters. You can quibble about exactly what it is. Pi over 6 meters would be, actually matches the surveys of the pyramid. Now, pi over 6 meters turns out to be 1.717843752 English feet is one Egyptian royal cubit. Now, the Royal Babylonian scale, their Royal Babylonian foot is 1.1 English feet. The Mohenjo-Daro Harappa Indus civilization in Indus Valley, they too were using 1.1 English feet. The Royal Babylonian, so 1.5 Royal Babylonian feet was their cubit, but each foot was divided into 20 fingers, and each finger was then divided into 6 grains. So it just so happens that 55 Egyptian royal cubits is 1,717.84353752 Royal Babylonian fingers, and 1.71784353752 feet equals 1 Egyptian royal cubit. Precisely the same number, just a shifted decimal place. 55. The Great Pyramid, so 440 Egyptian royal cubits base length, so each side. The most you can see of a pyramid is 2 sides. 280 Egyptian royal cubits high, so therefore the maximum visible base length of a pyramid, which turns out to be the rotational speed of the Earth per second, is 880 Egyptian royal cubits. We can reduce that to a 22 over 7 or 22 to 7 ratio. 22 over 7 is pi, or as good as approximate as you're going to get in the real world. Of course, it's not the exact number, but if you use that in engineering, government work, as they say, that's more than accurate enough. And back to 55 feet, where we saw in these various structures, there was a unit, for instance, it was in the, was it the Oxford or the Cambridge exam? This was one of the questions. So this, what they call the Cremona foot, which essentially 6 Cremona feet equals 7 English feet. It was in the old text, it's disappeared, it's a very, but anyway, 6 over 7. Well, it just so happens that 55 feet is 31.42857142857142857 repeater, which is 22 over 7, again, just a shifted decimal spot. So 55 feet giving us this number related to a pyramid as well. And 55 feet is 165 hands, 220 palm, 660 inches, 880 fingers, etc. Well, 880 Egyptian royal cubits base length of the pyramid, but this number 55 feet is related to very interesting connections to Sun, Earth and Moon, That'll be for the next part, SGD. Have a good one.